Hello to all my dear followers. Today I want to welcome you to a new chapter of What If Kurama Was Sent to the Past to Train Naruto? If you want a next chapter, just hit the like button. Now without further ado, I'll leave you with the fanfic.
Naruto hated this. He knew that he wouldn't be useful in this fight. Despite his years of training, he was nothing close to the level of power either his Jounin sensei or that missing nin was putting out. Sure, he had seen a bit of Jiraiya's taijutsu before. He had sparred with him often with Kurama's power. But he had never seen him use ninjutsu, other than that summoning technique, and now he had a sort of idea why. But this wasn't about beating Zabuza one-on-one. Kakashi looked like he was having trouble. And, well, you're not in mortal danger, Kit. And you aren't going to put yourself in mortal danger, either, just so you can steal some power. But that's not fair. Kakashi is not my problem. Naruto gaped. Look. I don't care about pretty much anyone except you. And I happen to have a bit of a dim view of most of the bastards in your village. In Kakashi's case, it was mainly that he had decided that simply watching Naruto as he grew up and making sure that the constant abuse didn't kill him was a perfectly acceptable way of honoring his father's memory. But he wasn't going to say that out loud. He had decided early on that turning Naruto against practically everyone he still liked was a bad idea, and was unlikely to keep him alive, anyway. But I can't just do nothing. Kakashi was suddenly caught in a water prison. Kurama paused. Alright, Kit, I'll give you a hint. Just a small one. You can help. Just use your brains. Not brute strength. If you really want to know, this is exactly why I refuse to give you my power. You get really lazy with it. Even when fighting Jiraiya. Remember your training. Panic started to rise as Kakashi began to visibly run out of oxygen, and the copy of Zabuza advanced. Have you learned nothing? Plant explosive tags on your clones. Transform into shuriken. Seriously, all you have to do is get past a single clone. Think. Naruto's eyes shot open. Oh. He briefly chastised himself for forgetting nearly half his lessons, then turned to his teammates. Sasuke. Listen up. There's something I need to tell you. I have a plan. Only the thought that the client might still be in danger kept Naruto walking. Of course, he had a vague idea of how powerful Kakashi was when he set the bell test for them. But that concept just flew right out the window and disintegrated in front of him. He had just seen the real power of an elite ninja. After Kakashi started using the Sharingan, it was astounding. Even Zabuza started to take things seriously. He wasn't quite sure about what to feel about it. And Jiraiya was likely even stronger, if his reputation actually meant anything. The jutsu being tossed around there, it was mind-boggling. But they had pulled through. Kakashi was even winning at the end there. Then they got rescued by that hunter nin. There was something off about him, but almost all of his sensei talked about how ninja went a little crazy sometimes. And that ninja had to have been almost his age. And he looked almost like Anbu. Now his constant training seemed a hell of a lot more important. Especially now that he realized that it wasn't just his life that he had to worry about. No matter what Kurama said. Of course, Kakashi had not been happy that they were facing an opponent this notorious, especially since it was a bit too much for even a B-ranked mission. But Kurama had constantly hammered into his head that there was always something that went sideways. Like, it didn't happen every time, but often enough where he should expect it to happen and prepare for the worst. He had been skeptical, but apparently, Kurama was right. As always. Well, you have at least a week for training and preparation. Naruto frowned. Why only a week? The bridge didn't look that close to being finished. Zabuza is still alive. He froze suddenly, causing the rest of the group to stop and look at him, silently asking him for an explanation. Zabuza is still alive. Sakura rolled her eyes. Don't be stupid, Naruto. Didn't you hear what Kakashi-sensei said about hunter nin? Naruto looked at his teammate, panicking slightly at having to explain Kurama, before a sudden realization leaped into his head. Sakura, you use a lot of senbon, right? Why not use your poison on something like shuriken or kunai? She frowned. Senbon can more easily pierce deep enough for the poison to be injected into major arteries. It is much more fast-acting. But Senbon by themselves aren't really that lethal, are they? Naruto, Kakashi already checked his vitals. And besides, I've read that if you are accurate enough, you can hit vital points that are very lethal, poison or no. Kakashi suddenly cursed under his breath. He was practically swaying on his feet due to the absolute exhaustion from his technique, but regardless, he should have caught it earlier. No, Naruto is right. Senbon can do more than just kill. And now that I think about it, they were not acting properly. Hunter need never carry a body. Destroying it on the spot is more efficient, and negates the ability for them to be intercepted in transit. If you hit the correct spots, it is possible, if very draining to the recipient, to feign a very convincing death. Sakura gasped. Tazuna paled. So, that means, Zabuza is likely still alive. Fortunately, it will still take him time to recover. He took a deep breath. Time I badly need to recover as well. The Sharingan takes a lot out of me. So what do we do now? Kakashi nodded at their client. Get him safe, just in case. And then, training. Kakashi was not teaching them anything new. And for once, none of Team 7 were complaining. They were at the skill level that anything that would actually have any use would take more than a week to be usable in combat. And they knew this. No, they were drilling the basics. Sakura was working on her accuracy. Sasuke was still working on increasing his stamina, so he didn't run out of chakra if the fight lasted for more than a few minutes. And Naruto, on Kurama's instruction, asked Kakashi for a good place to train away from the others. That earned him a raised eyebrow, but the request was accepted regardless. Basically, Kurama was going to push things a little on the chakra training. He was going to trap the entire bridge area to oblivion, but the actual workers were civilians, and probably wouldn't feel comfortable being surrounded by explosives. Or hidden knives. Or even smoke bombs. He was going to ask his new fox summon for help, but he couldn't do much about the fact that their likely encounter space for the enemy ninja was also frequented by civilians. That cut out more than 3/4 of his trap options. He did end up trapping the builder's actual house, though. Everything except the front door. And he told all the family about it. They were a lot more receptive to the idea after he explained himself. He still had to keep things non-lethal, just in case. The kid that lived there was infuriatingly depressed, though. He didn't even care that they were ninja, or clearly knew what they were doing. He didn't even respect Kakashi, and he was a jounin. But he could kinda understand how the kid got so messed up. He still had a little trouble dealing with human death, and it was his job to do that. If it had been someone like Tucci, okay, his response would probably be to rip whoever did it to shreds or die trying, but he had the training for that. This kid was a civilian. And barely even academy age besides. Naruto's chest got uncomfortably hot. Alright, Kit. This feels like the limit. I wonder if Kakashi'll let me try to assassinate this Gato guy. Later. Think about it after I'm not reinforcing your desire to murder people. Naruto looked down at himself. Wow. Okay then. He didn't just have chakra claws now. He had actual ones. He wasn't even using the transformation jutsu. Unfortunately, the little flashes of light dancing around him were a lot more frequent. Stealth was not exactly an option. If stealth was an option, you wouldn't need my power in the first place. Right. Stealth was an option, technically. If Kurama was actually in control of the chakra after he gave it to his partner, or theoretically, if Naruto learned to manage it like a bijou, he would be able to integrate it with no visual effects. That was the main reasons fully integrated Jinchuriki were able to induce partial transformations without a chakra cloak. But that was irrelevant at the moment. Now, taijutsu with claws is significantly different than with fists. Naruto grinned at a new possibility. And with henge, steel can block better. Without my chakra to deflect blows or negate injury, you won't do well. Not without significantly more skill. Or speed. Though, before we start, I do recall you saying that you had an idea. Back in the boat? Oh, yeah. Well, remember how Jiraiya said I can't both project your chakra and make that gifting stuff seal? Of course. Kurama still didn't quite expect Naruto to succeed with either objective. Naruto did the impossible all the time, but it was better not to hold out too much hope. That only increased the pain and anger later on when it failed. It didn't mean he had no hope. It was just significantly measured. Well, you know my shadow clones? They make copies of me, right? And they're nothing but chakra. So if I can make one only using your chakra. He trailed off with a grin. Unlikely. That jutsu creates a clone of the one who shapes the chakra, not the one who provides it. Naruto's smile didn't fade. Well, I'll just have to change the jutsu, then. Not right now, you're not. If you get in another fight with Zabuza, you'll need to be ready. I thought you said my life wasn't in danger last time. Really, Kurama should have seen this question coming. He had held back in the previous fight not because Zabuza was not dangerous, but because he knew that last time, Naruto had fared just fine, even without his assistance. Now, he was stuck. He had trained Naruto in what he considered to be the most important shinobi arts of deception and creativity, traits he had underutilized before. Well, this time, he would be much more prepared when things got serious. The fact remained, though, that while he was possibly the best prepared genin there could possibly be, he was still a genin. Not even the technically genin he had been in his last life. An actual one, who deserved to still be one. And Kurama had no intention of pushing Naruto to such an extent that would create results like Haku. Or Danzo's route. And so his skills would likely still not be sufficient for this mission. And so he would need the power boost to break out of Haku's mirrors. Kurama. He decided to go with mostly truth. His accomplice is very skilled. Very likely above your level. While Kakashi can at least hold off Momochi Zabuza, Haku is an opponent that cannot be underestimated. Haku. Kurama cursed his tongue, which was far freer than he had expected. It was getting harder and harder to separate the two Narutos in his mind, despite the clear skill differences. Never mind that. His name is of little concern. You will likely have to fight him, and you do not have the power to counter his abilities. Even though he is likely to aim for non-lethal damage, there is still a very real possibility of death. But if Sakura or Sasuke help, it is not a matter of help, or even trickery this time. I have taught you how to think like a ninja, which will win you many fights. But in certain situations, like this fight on the bridge, where damage to the bridge is unwise, you have no elemental jutsu, and your opponent outclasses you heavily in certain attributes, especially speed, power is the one factor that you will be able to use to win. Naruto sighed. Alright, you win. I still expect you to only ask me for power when it becomes absolutely necessary. But I cannot take the chance that your possible failure would be permanent. Right. Naruto scratched the back of his head, momentarily surprised when the claws actually caught in his hair. He brought his hand up to his face, examining it. This just hasn't really sunk in, you know. That I could actually die. Or that I might kill someone else. He put the hand down. Maybe even someone who doesn't completely deserve it. I guess I can just make sure that doesn't happen as often as I can. Kakashi was distinctly frustrated. He hadn't been able to observe any of Naruto's training. Worse, he couldn't even blame him. Unlike his teammates, Naruto seemed to instinctively understand that this was technically enemy territory. Or perhaps that was another learned behavior from his worrisome teacher. Regardless of the source, it was at least useful. Kakashi had learned early on that Naruto had a truly astounding disguising jutsu. Whether a legitimate Jinchuriki power or a lucky modification of the Academy Henchi wasn't entirely sure, but given its effectiveness and strange flexibility, he was strongly suspecting the former. The fact remained that if Naruto actually wanted to get somewhere unnoticed, he got there unnoticed. He was almost tempted to summon his tracking hounds, but besides being a terrible waste of chakra that he really needed to use to recover his strength, he was almost sure that the only thing that differentiated the fox Naruto and an actual fox was the presence of chakra. If he even kept to one form like that. He was almost sure he didn't in this case. He would have needed a sensor to find him, not a conventional tracker. Hopefully, the enemy wouldn't have hired one. It didn't entirely make sense for a man like Gato to do so, or even understand shinobi enough to know why one would be important, but he still worried. At least he had a good idea about what he would be keeping so secret. And really, if he were honest with himself, if the Kyuubi decided to run rampant, he would likely not have much of a chance of stopping it. Jiraiya would be the only one even close to helping out. Or maybe Tenzo, with his Mokutan. Besides, the week was almost over, and Naruto hadn't shown any signs of worrying behavior. Only the expected nerves from expecting a confrontation with a powerful ninja. Or perhaps that he finished each day almost at complete exhaustion. Of course, that wasn't entirely unusual for Naruto. But it was news for Sasuke and Sakura. Their group training sessions were significantly less intense. Now, though, both of them were attending to their training with a focused enthusiasm that was otherwise not present. The only true incident was with Tsunade's grandson, Inari, the day before Zabuza was projected to recover. That was a situation that had been slowly simmering for days. He did his best to comfort the child, but by far, it had been the most he had ever seen Naruto disturbed by anything. No matter. Tomorrow was when it was likely to all come to a head. All of them needed their sleep. 6 in the morning was not when Kakashi was planning to get up. But it was hard to plan for Naruto. He was shaking him rather insistently. "Sensei. That Gato guy didn't wait. People are attacking the bridge." Naruto was supposed to be sleeping, gathering his strength. Not keeping watch. But Kakashi didn't argue. He just stood and rushed out of the house, Naruto on his heels. "Why did you come back, then? Were these attackers ninja?" Naruto shook his head. "No, just reject samurai or something. But I'm not really sure how long my clones will last against them. I didn't put special amounts of chakra into them. Just the normal amount. One of them already popped, which is what woke me up. So he was sleeping, then. It didn't take them too long to clean up the remaining thugs, since there were less than 10 actually there, including the 2 that Naruto's clones had dispatched. The number would have likely been higher had Tsunade's workers not been there to start their work day. Protecting a single target was significantly easier than 12. Naruto wasn't exactly confident with his clones making more clones, at least not in battle. But it was disturbing that Gato had staged an attack now, of all times. Like he knew that they would be expecting the attack later on in the day, and yet was patient enough to strike at the least likely moment. He was thinking disturbingly like a ninja. Either that, or it was a coincidence, and he simply got impatient. But Kakashi didn't believe in coincidences. Neither did Naruto. Naruto frowned. Why didn't he just hire more ninja? That takes time, Naruto. And the ability to find missing nin. Legitimate villages are also more expensive, and may refuse a job if it is likely to create consequences like this one. It was also a possibility that Zabuza was actually the instigator of this attack, and had some measure of authority over Gato's men. Either way, they needed to be prepared now, not in the originally planned 3 hours. Gather Sasuke and Sakura. One of you tail Tazuna, one of you should stay with his family, and the other will come with me to the bridge to guard the workers. Naruto nodded and raced off. Kakashi sighed. It was not going to be a problem, per se. He was nearly back at full strength, and he was no stranger to early mornings. But no matter what was right, he was still bringing 3 genin on a practically A-rank mission. Nothing had gone smoothly, and he had a feeling that that trend wasn't going to end anytime soon. Kurama sighed inside his prison. He knew starting out that teaching Naruto would not necessarily be an enjoyable experience for him. Humans had some really stupid instincts to get rid of, and barely any useful ones to speed things along. And he knew that he wouldn't exactly be considered teacher material. It was particularly hard to curb his impatience, especially seeing Naruto so inexperienced even compared to his still rather stupid teenage self. Though that teenage self had some unexpectedly good moments. But the worst part was knowing that your student was good, but not good enough. He found that his predictions on Naruto's ability to be depressingly accurate. He might have actually beaten Haku with trickiness, if he hadn't been so inexperienced to run straight into the trap of his Kekii Genkai. Of course, he didn't actually know what the mirrors did, but it was still rather stupid to run into something unknown and so outside the realm of normal ninja ability. Or perhaps he just didn't have a good enough idea of what was normal ninja ability. That didn't mean he wouldn't get an earful about it after the fight, though. He could have at least sent a clone in first. After he lent his power, though, it was some great catharsis by proxy. Naruto didn't have to dodge any of the Senbon. His chakra-enhanced body was too durable for them to properly pierce him, at least at Haku's strength level. But he did anyway, and the look on the boy's face was priceless. Naruto could have smashed the mirrors easily with a swipe of his new claws. But he decided to simply catch Haku when he jumped between them and beat him with straight taijutsu. Okay, so perhaps Sasuke was looking at them with an intensity that demanded answers later. But with all the lessons he had been plagiarizing from Kakashi about teamwork, he had been surprised Naruto hadn't insisted on telling his team earlier. Right. Kakashi stopped him from telling them earlier. But there was something else that bothered Kurama. There was a feeling growing in him, that he wasn't entirely comfortable with. Naruto had done such things to him before, of course. Strange feelings had plagued him practically since he had first reached out to him. Identifying the emotion didn't help much, either. It was pride. Pride in someone else. It didn't make sense, though. In almost every objective way, Naruto had failed this mission. He had to be reminded constantly to use his brain, and when it mattered most, Kurama still had to step in. But the feeling remained, and it was infuriating. He was proud at all the wrong things. Why was he proud at Naruto managing to hold in his rage, when that rage was his own? Why was he proud of someone getting something right on the second try, when a single misstep could mean death? The worst part of all this was that he could no longer stay mad at his student properly. It was a difficulty with Naruto in general, but he could at least manage it by telling himself that this was a different Naruto. A more annoying one that could never replace the original. Maybe this was why Naruto was totally blind to just how annoying that kid named after the village was when he taught him the first time around. Of course, he could still be annoyed by the stupid things he did. Apparently, he taught Naruto the purpose of a shinobi a little too well, and rather than kill Haku, or Zabuza for that matter, he somehow convinced them that once their own mission was impossible to complete, it would be fun to drive that idiot Gato out. After they sliced him up, of course. The more things change, the more things stay the same, apparently. But it had unfortunate implications for Naruto's future interactions with missing Nin. Most of them that were after Naruto were much stronger than Haku or Zabuza, and leaving any of them alive in any way meant imminent danger, not a potential ally. At least these two were relatively decent people. Or at least decent ninja. Easily predictable, at minimum. At least the danger is over, and I can go back to my nap. The rest of the day was torture for Naruto. He could feel the looks of his teammates on his back, and he had a pretty good idea of why, but none of them seemed to want to bother him about it. Sakura's looks were worse. At least he could understand the clear confusion and jealousy from Sasuke. While Sakura's expression didn't quite match those from the rest of the village, well, she didn't even know what was in him, and her expression was totally foreign to him. It was a well-known fact that girls were strange and unreadable, but something in the back of his head told him that it was a warning sign. And it wasn't even the other voice in his head. Remind me to give you a few lessons on espionage myself. Jiraiya is hopeless, but I assure you that girls are not as strange as you think them to be. That one. If it bothers you so much, just ask the brats about it. If they are going to reject us, it's going to happen with or without your input. Naruto knew he was right. Or at least strongly suspected that he knew what he was talking about. Still, he couldn't quite bring himself to speak up about it. This wasn't like Gigi, where he already knew about Kurama, just not that he was nice. Sasuke lost his entire family, even extended family, because most of them blamed the Uchiha for the attack. They weren't entirely wrong. You already told me all about that. Kurama just grunted inside his head. It had been an entire rant. Quite a few rants, if you counted all the ones about the Uchiha in general. Sakura, well, she didn't lose anyone to the attack, but she came from a civilian family. Those were even worse than ninja families when it came to accusations of him literally being a demon. A reborn Kurama, not his prison. And he somehow had to either lie about being able to control Kurama's power, or explain that he had mellowed out since the attack. Kurama sounded offended. I did not mellow out. Naruto ignored him. A shadow clone popped up right next to his bed. He had all night to think, and possibly plan on what he would say. The sun was just peeking above the horizon when Naruto heard a soft knock on his door. The clone yawned, but got up from the chair and opened the door. He had expected Kakushi-sensei, possibly giving them some extra training. Or even Sasuke, determined to figure out and perhaps even copy the power he showed in the fight. He wasn't expecting Sakura. He didn't expect her to look clearly worried. At least not worried for him, rather than the other way around. I'll wake boss. I don't think you want to talk to a clone. Sakura frowned slightly, but since Naruto couldn't figure out exactly why, he just shrugged the thought off and dispelled himself. Naruto woke up instantly, as he had trained himself to do after the influx of new memories hit him. And then he immediately groaned and wanted back in bed as he realized that nobody's life was actually in danger. Really? I couldn't have just shook myself like a normal person. Sakura. What are you doing here this early? I couldn't sleep very well. Naruto winced. Sakura's eyes widened slightly in recognition. She put her hands up quickly. Not because of you. Well, not because of that. Not anymore, at least. I could see that you had very good control, and even though I would like to know how you did any of that, well. Sakura looked around herself. I'm worried about you. You always just seem to know what to do. You're always better prepared, always. She sighed. You didn't always do that well in the academy, but you knew immediately what Kakashi was trying to do with that bell test. You know all sorts of skills they never taught there, you just know all sorts of things that. Sakura shook her head, then sighed. That's not what I came here for. I've just, never seen you that worried about something. I just wanted to say, well. She smirked. I might be a little jealous, but you aren't as annoying as I thought you were in the academy. And she looked a little awkward. I don't think anyone is going to have any issues with your bloodline. Naruto looked back up at her, and she stiffened at his expression. That doesn't mean I like you like that, though. He deflated a little, but his awkward smile remained. Thank you. But, it isn't a bloodline. Sakura started. It isn't? What else could it be? I've never heard of something like that. Is it something you can do because of your large chakra reserves? Naruto rubbed the back of his head. It's more like the reason I have really big chakra reserves. Okay, maybe it's because of my mom, but. He shifted uncomfortably. We should probably wake up Sasuke. He needs to know too. You do have a bloodline, though. I do. Sakura left, presumably to get their teammate. Through your mother. That increased chakra is technically a bloodline, and it is the very reason you can hold me. Even if I still liked you, without it, I would start to burn you from the inside out. Naruto frowned. I thought you said you were the reason I had really big chakra reserves, not the other way around. Your body did have to adapt, yes. But it would not have had the chance without your Uzumaki heritage. Is there anything else I should know about it? Just having a big chakra pool sounds, well, it doesn't sound like any other bloodlines you told me about. Your chakra is extra compatible, I suppose. I remember that many Uzumaki could give their chakra to others, who could use it as their own. And then there was their damnable Kekkai Genkai. That was annoying. Naruto jerked slightly. Wait, what? I suppose it wouldn't be terrible if you happened to possess it. Your mother had some very powerful sealing chains that could hold even me for a time. Unfortunately. It made being sealed inside of her incredibly annoying. And very boring. Sealing chains. Not so loud. But yes. It was rare. But. Kurama briefly thought of the war. Seals strong enough to hold one like himself would be incredibly useful. It was one of the only reasons he thought that teaching Naruto sealing in the first place was worth the effort. And even though they weren't permanent, they made some of the more finicky permanent seals quite a bit safer to use. But I suppose we could see if you have the potential. Naruto. Sakura was back, and Sasuke followed her. He didn't look entirely enthusiastic about being woken up so early, but there was a curiosity behind his annoyed expression. He shifted uncomfortably. So? Sakura asked, uncertainty clouding her voice. Naruto sighed. I guess I should start by telling you my birthday. There was a swirl of illusory leaves, and Kakashi was in the room. His expression was uncharacteristically serious. I think we should take this somewhere more private, don't you? Naruto glanced at Kakashi with a panicked expression, but calmed down, a sudden warmth in his chest. He didn't say no this time. I know a place. It no longer mattered that his team would see it. And he wasn't going to be training there anymore, anyway. Kurama already told him that their training was going to be focusing on more traditional shinobi arts for the more immediate future. It was the most private place he could find back when he had started training with Kurama, in one of the more inhospitable areas of the forest north of the village, and away from any trails he could recognize by a large margin. His training was not exactly subtle. Or quiet. Though he supposed that, while private, it was not a particularly well-advised place to explain about his friend and occupant. While destroyed trees and rocks were a fairly common sight on training fields of higher-level shinobi, the claw marks were a bit unsettling to people who didn't know anything about Kurama. Or by the slight twitches in Kakashi's neutral expression, likely unsettling to those who only knew Kurama when he was angry or being controlled. So, Naruto, what about your birthday is important? Kakashi answered for him. Sakura, Naruto's birthday is October 10th, 12 years ago. She frowned. Isn't that? The attack of the Kyuubi, yes. Naruto spoke up for the first time. You know it's impossible to kill a tailed beast, right, Sakura? She frowned. No. Didn't the yondaime? I guess it's possible to disperse a tailed beast, but they eventually reform, and it's almost impossible to predict when or where that will happen. So ever since they were made, ninja have been sealing them instead. Kakashi reeled internally. Made? What has that fox been telling Naruto? The general consensus by the vast majority of shinobi is that they are natural phenomena. He hadn't been seriously considering the possibility that the Kyuubi was actually friendly with his host. Momentarily harmless, perhaps. But even Jinchuriki, who had full control over their tailed beast, had no more insight than the rest of them. But yeah. My dad sealed it in me before he died, since Mom was too weak to seal it back in her. Naruto looked down, not particularly noticing the rest of his team's eyes boring into him. So he did learn who his parents were. It appeared that he was significantly more mature than his constant pranks indicated. Not once had he used his parents as leverage when he was caught, or even when he was shunned. Or he was withholding that information for when it would have maximal effect. Either way, it was a promising sign for a ninja. Kakashi turned to Naruto's teammates. Incidentally, the information held in this discussion is considered an S-class secret by the Hokage. I doubt I have to tell you what the punishment for telling someone else is, do I? Sakura's eyes widened. Even Sasuke looked visibly taken aback. Then what about Naruto? Will something happen to him? Kakashi smiled. He is the only one exempt from this rule. Though since much of this was kept secret from him, I doubt that the Hokage expected that to be much of a problem. Sakura frowned and looked at Naruto. Then how did you find out? I know you took the scroll of seals, but I didn't think you would make a habit of stealing secret files. Kurama told me. Who's Kurama? Naruto rubbed his stomach. That's his name. The Kyuubi. She tensed. He's not that bad. At their alarmed expressions, he elaborated. I should probably mention he was being controlled when he attacked the village. Kakashi's head whipped around. What? Yeah. Someone that called himself Madara used a really strong genjutsu on him. Made him act like a dumb animal. Madara? But how could he be alive? Well, I only said that he called himself Madara. Kurama says he didn't look like him. Madara was taller. And had a different physical build. He also could control him a lot better. He was a lot more annoying, too. He also says he was a lot more annoying, but I'm not sure what he's talking about when he says that. Kakashi frowned. So someone from the Uchiha clan was involved, after all. But if Itachi was able to kill them, yet they could control a tailed beast, it doesn't make sense. And Itachi was loyal before he snapped. I knew him. Could it really be Madara, just weakened by time? Could he still be alive, after all? Sasuke spoke up. So this is the source of your power, I guess. Kurama won't let me use it unless my life is in danger, though. He looked around at the destroyed training area. And practice using it, I guess. We're ninja. Our lives are in danger constantly. Naruto shrugged. His definition of life in danger is a lot different. He says that power makes ninja very lazy. So he wants me to solve things by myself if it's possible. Or with my team. Sasuke frowned. I mean, I don't like that he's sealed in me any more than he does, and I sure would like it if he gave me some of it whenever I want, but it's his power, not actually mine. And, well, I wouldn't want people to just use my chakra without my permission, just because I have a whole lot of it. If I give it to people, I want it to be for a good reason. He reluctantly nodded. I just have to figure out how to actually give it to people, first. Sakura sighed. You can't just give people chakra, Naruto. Naruto shrugged. It's an Uzumaki thing, apparently. She groaned. I thought you said you didn't have a bloodline. Anyway, it doesn't matter all that much. Kakashi, shouldn't we get back soon? I know Gato is dead, but we are still supposed to be protecting Tsunade. Kakashi jabbed a thumb at Naruto. He left a few clones. You did? Naruto nodded. I thought things might take a while to explain. When? Kakashi answered her. During our little walk through the forest. Naruto has a few abilities he has decided to keep secret. He glanced at the boy. We should use the rest of our time off to polish our teamwork, now that secrets are no longer an issue, don't you think, Naruto? Naruto winced. He hadn't even brought out his Shunshin ability during their time together. And he didn't even have a good excuse either, other than the flimsy I'm not that good at it yet. His modified version may have had almost no use, but the normal jutsu was almost complete, as long as he jumped a little before activating it. Kurama's definition of mastery was different than most of his classmates, and even Iruka-sensei, but it didn't mean he shouldn't use something in practice. And he didn't even mention his espionage training with Jiraiya. Sure, it wasn't fighting like his teammates seemed to focus on, but it was still important for his teammates to know his abilities. They weren't enemies. And despite Sakura's admittedly annoying behavior and Sasuke's insistence to do everything that he could on his own, they were the closest people Naruto had to friends that were in the same class as himself. Okay, and he still had a bit of a crush on Sakura, despite everything. Naruto smiled, relaxing a little. None of them had rejected him. Right, sensei. So, what are we starting with? The last few days of the bridge building went by as fast as D-rank type work ever did. Now that they were less worried about an attack, they were able to be more involved with the actual building process. As usual, Naruto did a majority of the work himself, as his clones let him be many places at once. And their group training sessions, even going 2 at a time to keep a guard with Tsunade, were much different. Better, somehow, even though Naruto was suddenly the one winning every spar. Though he did constantly get complaints from his teammates that he spent more time running away with a Shunshin than actually fighting. It felt good. Not the winning, though that was still a little satisfying, but telling someone else the truth with something like this. It felt like trust, and he only had one other person like that. Maybe Gigi was like that, but he was always busy and almost never there. Maybe Iruka-sensei, but he was usually more interested in how Naruto was feeling, and not about his jutsu or anything like that. His abilities had a strange effect on his teammates, too. He had never seen Sasuke with so much focus on a task actually at hand. And he had never quite seen Sakura so visibly disheveled. Not for the purpose of training, certainly. She looked oddly prettier when she was like that, which was a confusing thought all on its own. And she was getting a lot harder to beat, too, which only made winning feel better than usual. Not that he was even supposed to be a combat-focused ninja, at least according to Kakashi. After evaluating his trap-making, he was much more suited to sabotage. Especially considering his disguise abilities. And his ability to get the heck out of there. His only problem was his massive chakra. Even with Kurama behind a seal, his chakra pool itself had grown massively to compensate, and even with his best efforts suppressing it, he barely got it down to look like he was a normal, adult, jounin. It sure made things like explosive tags a lot easier to use, which was a big plus. With everything that happened, though, none of them really relaxed properly until they were back on their way to Konoha. Oh, and he had a bridge named after him. Which was both great and terrible. Great because it represented an entire town that respected him, and possibly even admired him despite half of them kinda fearing him at the same time. He had dreamed of having things like bridges named after him when he became Hokage. The issue was that he expected to become Hokage first. That is, strong enough to be well known like that. Hopefully, none of the other nations would realize that the name of the bridge in Wave was the same as one of Konoha's genin and take special interest in him. Or if the stories weren't exaggerated, look too closely at his face in general, because his dad could definitely be considered well known. Kurama had told him many times, and he had seen enough of Haku and Zabuza to know he was not ready in the least for that kind of attention. Unfortunately, Kurama had refused to give him any training beyond some occasional advice about the sealing homework Jiraiya had assigned him before the mission began. And then Kakashi told them on the way back to Konoha that he was giving them an entire week off of training. PFF, giving us a week. Like we need even more time off. Not even Sakura looked happy about that, like he half expected her to be. Naruto kicked a stick into the fire. Now they were back out of Wave, fires were allowed again. Which was nice for his teammates, since ration bars were disgusting, and they seemed to have a weird sort of aversion to eating things raw. It meant he was able to make ramen, though. Still, he wasn't being entirely fair to them. The academy might not have been that long ago by any objective measurement, but Sakura definitely wasn't the kind of kunoichi she used to be, book-smart but knowing almost nothing practical. She hadn't been stuck guarding Tsunade during their fight with the missing Nin because she was weak, it was because most of her offensive capabilities were ranged anyway. She wasn't strong just yet, but she wasn't just the prettiest ninja anymore. Sasuke was, well, he still didn't talk that much, his dark looks off in the distance were still worrying, and Kurama still didn't like him at all, but none of those dark looks were directed at him anymore. For Naruto, even something as simple as someone not disliking him was something to cherish. He still wasn't quite the person he'd choose as a teammate, but after what happened on the bridge, it was hard to not feel attached. Naruto leaned back, watching the stars. Now that he was fully with his team, and there was no civilian in the way, it was easier to notice that he fell asleep much later than the rest of them. He got up earlier, too. It wasn't that he was too nervous, and there wasn't a technique he was particularly excited about practicing at the moment. He just wasn't tired until later. Kakashi had noticed this early on, and he had taken first watch ever since. Last watch, too, if he was feeling particularly lazy. Okay, maybe he did have a point about needing to recover chakra. Naruto. He sat up, glancing at the fire to make sure she hadn't noticed something ready to escape. When that didn't seem to be the case, he turned to his teammate more fully. Sakura. She looked nervous, and even a little embarrassed. Naruto's heart caught in his throat, but he forced it back down. What's it like? Huh? Having the Kyuubi in you. She frowned. I can't even think of how that would work. Naruto wasn't expecting something like a confession of love, but he couldn't help but be slightly disappointed. Still, this was a topic he was intimately familiar with. Possibly uniquely so. Actually teaching something to Sakura instead of the other way around was a novel change. You don't have to. Naruto smiled to reassure her. No, it's fine. First, his name's Kurama, remember? Right. She was still obviously uneasy. Naruto took a deep breath. Right. Well, I guess I can start with how it works, I guess. Naruto took a small scroll from his uniform. So, you are familiar with storage scrolls, right? Sakura nodded. He rolled it out to a blank section, and Sakura leaned in a bit closer in interest. Most that were sold in supply stores were already filled out with script, to store certain kinds of items. Naruto picked up a pine cone, and took his brush out of its place on his arm holster. So a basic seal for holding things takes this form. He made a few strokes, ones that were very much common to the other seals she could see on the portion of the scroll that was still spread out between them. And then there are a few more that determine what sort of state you want to store it in. These, too, seemed almost identical to most of the others he had. And then finally, some more that sorta describe what you need to hold there. Then you just add some chakra, and the pinecone disappeared into the scroll with a poof of smoke. Naruto glanced at Sakura's face, and seeing that there was no confusion there, he released the pinecone and rolled the scroll back up. Naruto, did you just waste that entire section of the scroll for a pinecone? He just shrugged. Ero-sensei said he'd teach me a jutsu to wipe off inactive seals pretty soon. So, what does a sealing scroll have to do with your seal? How do you seal, that? Naruto looked slightly offended, but didn't retort. Well, sealing someone like Kurama is actually kinda similar to a scroll. But, a lot harder, obviously. Sealing something that already has chakra is a nightmare, otherwise I'd already be sealing my shadow clone so I didn't have to waste any chakra in battle. You have to make sure that the chakra that you use to seal it is in a really specific pathway that doesn't mess up the chakra in what you're sealing, or in Kurama's case, that his chakra won't be able to mess up the seal. Sakura frowned. She remembered the anatomical diagrams they studied in the academy. The chakra network was not a simple system. It's even worse, because Kurama doesn't even really have a chakra network. She blinked. Wait, what? He's made of chakra. It still flows and stuff, but yeah. It's harder. And then since Dad kinda wanted me to use his chakra, there has to be a controlled leak. And that sounds easier, but it's not. Ha! Naruto poked the fire with a branch. Sakura scooted herself a little closer. That is interesting, but I was more curious about how it felt for you. He blinked in surprise, then mentally kicked himself. Of course, she wasn't exactly looking to be a sealing master. I mean, it's pretty great to have someone to talk to all the time. He chuckled. Kinda annoying, too, but mostly good. Sakura nodded. It wasn't what she was looking for, exactly. But she wasn't just about to say that. She had a lot of time to think about things, and it was clear now that Naruto's paradoxical behavior of being incredibly annoying, then studying intently, sleeping through class and failing to answer any questions coherently, then passing the tests anyway, was a result of his rather strange upbringing. And with the way the rest of the class, even her, stayed away from him all the time, and those looks he got from civilians and even some shinobi, having a single friend to lean on, well, she didn't know how she would have gotten through primary school without Ino. If the adults knew about his little problem, then things must have been even worse. About the bloodline thing. Sorry for not talking about it earlier. I didn't really think it was a bloodline thing, just that I got a lot of chakra from Mom. But it also means that I'm the only one who really can hold Kurama. I can't really say what it feels like, since I kinda always had him in here, and I don't know what it feels like to be anybody else, but when he gives me a lot of chakra. Naruto shrugged awkwardly. I'm not sure what to say. It's kinda like I'm on fire. But it doesn't really hurt either, you know. Sakura smirked. It's okay, Naruto. I was just curious. She shifted again, looking at the smaller fire that Naruto kept for himself after the others had left. So, what is he like? Kurama? Well, he does still get angry a lot, and he's not exactly patient. Still says he wants to eat, like, half the people in the village. Sakura raised an eyebrow. And you said he wasn't that bad? Naruto shrugged. Well, he really likes me for some reason. Most of the times he gets angry, someone's trying to threaten me or something. And I can always talk him down. He knows that I still want to protect everyone in the village, not just the ones that are nice to me. At first, I thought it might be that me dying would make him die too, but no. He'd just reform somewhere else. I dunno what makes him like me so much, but he's a really, well, not a nice sensei, but a really good one. There was a soft gasp. So that's why you always knew so much. Well, he can't actually use jutsu. He said it's because he can't use hand seals, but now that I think about it, it's probably that things just work different when you don't have a chakra network. But before Ero-sensei got here, he taught me about seals. And spying, and tricking people, and nutrition and stuff. And I never asked him about it, but he taught me pretty much everything Kakashi-sensei told us about teamwork and stuff. Nutrition. Naruto briefly paused to keep some sticks from rolling out of the fire. Well, I only really ate ramen at the time. And I couldn't really afford going to Ichiraku's all the time, so I guess it wasn't really healthy. And since I didn't know how to use a henge, I couldn't really afford any other food, either. Sakura frowned. What does a henge have to do with affording things? You aren't stealing, are you? No. Nothing like that. It's just that the price of things is different for me. Naruto. She deflated. So he taught me to hunt stuff. Her frown returned. I meant to ask you about that. Why do you eat all your meat raw? Completely apart from taste, don't you get sick? Is it because of the kyubi? Naruto cocked his head. Sick? Why would I get sick? She just stared at him. Naruto, there are diseases in raw meat that get destroyed by heat. You did know that, right? He just shrugged. Not really. I've never really gotten sick like that. So I dunno. It does taste good, though. If it doesn't for other people, maybe that is because of Kurama. Sakura frowned. Wait, do the germs and stuff have chakra? There are a few that affect the chakra system and feed on it, but no, why? Well, my chakra keeps me from burning up, so. Oh, right. Naruto yawned, and Sakura followed suit almost immediately after. All right. I need to keep watch, but if you're going to take third. Sakura nodded. Right. See you in the morning. Naruto smiled. See you. Good night. Good night, Naruto. Okay, so I was thinking. Dangerous, but carry on. Naruto snorted. About the Kage Bunshin. You aren't supposed to be training, remember? You're supposed to be relaxing. I am relaxing. Honest. I'm taking a walk. And I'm not even doing any spying, either. I meant your new idea. Naruto scoffed. It's not like I'm going to actually do it right now. I'm not as bad as I was before. As you were an hour ago, you mean? Shut up. I'm trying. But about the Kage Bunshin, the clones are made of chakra, right? Yes. You really do have a talent for stating the obvious, don't you? It's called a setup. So anyway, if they are made of pure chakra, then how do they act like me? I thought you would understand more than most, Naruto. I've talked about this before. Your will is inherent in your chakra. So why can't I just use your chakra to make shadow clones for you, then? If you're just made of chakra and will, then anything with your chakra and your will should be just, you, right? You are correct. Then it'll work. It would require, though, that my will be greater than yours. You have a strong will. It doesn't help that chakra pushed through the seal is pushed into your chakra system, making it difficult to distinguish. But you have been trying to filter out your will. So if you put more will and less chakra, maybe. And that will put my will into your body, which will not only be painful, but cause your own body to try and change into mine. Not a pleasant or safe experience. But it's worth. No. Naruto sighed. Why won't you let me? Because I care about you, brat. Do you need it spelled out? I am used to this prison. You don't need to do anything else. Well, if will is the problem, can you teach me? Teach you what? To filter it out like you do, duh. If you only use a little bit more, and I use a lot less. But you're human. Not a being of chakra. Naruto frowned. Does that matter? He suddenly noticed that he was drawing looks. Sorry. Does that matter? You said the clones were. No, it doesn't matter. Your idea is a good one. But you have a chakra network. You are not naturally a being like me. It will be frustrating for you. But if it works, then you can be free. Or, at least copies of you can be. You seem to forget that copies of me are me. I receive the memories and experiences regardless. It's a shame all the clones are so fragile, though. Perhaps. Perhaps not. What do you mean? At the very least, you will learn a lot about shadow clones. Naruto grinned. All right. Now. 3 days, Naruto. But 3 days. Naruto slumped. Fine. And you still have some more homework for Jiraiya that you can waste time with. Don't complain about it. 3 days later, Jiraiya found Naruto standing in their usual training field, creating shadow clones, and dismissing them almost as fast. This wasn't entirely unusual, but as the clones weren't actually doing anything, he decided to ask. So, kid, what you doing? Naruto, currently preoccupied, didn't even turn as he answered, making my shadow clones worse. Jiraiya laughed, the response certainly not what he was expecting. Naruto finally turned his head. Ero-sensei. Sorry, I'll get my homework and... Jiraiya waved him off. No need, I'll deal with that later. So, why exactly are you making your shadow clones worse now? Naruto wasn't quite an idiot. He knew that his teacher wasn't quite comfortable with Kurama. So he told the truth. Just not all of it. Well, I'm trying to get rid of the, me in the shadow clones. And if I can do that, then there's all sorts of stuff I can do with a thing made of just chakra. Jiraiya frowned. The one time he had heard of someone's identity being taken from chakra was when Minato was talking about improvements to Kushina's seal. He crossed his arms. Naruto noticed his expression. Okay, fine. Kurama's teaching me to manage my chakra like a biju. The clone thing is just a bonus. You're going to have to do better than that. I told you you still need work at lying. Naruto sighed. It wasn't technically lying, but he had long learned that technicalities did not work in his arguments with Kurama. So the main reason is actually so I can get Kurama's will into a clone instead of mine. Happy? Naruto, I am proud of your ability to withhold information, but you already told me about your ambitions. While I am still wary of your other teacher, I very much doubt that a single shadow clone, or even a barrage of them, will be enough to be a true danger. It's certainly better than your other ideas. Naruto let out a breath. Jiraiya grinned. Still, jutsu development before even learning any elements? Impressive. Naruto rolled his eyes. Speaking of. He started to take a few pieces of paper out of an equipment pouch. Not yet. I want you on your way to being a sage before you start with an element, Naruto. Naruto frowned. Why? Because foxes are different from toads. Just pass on the message, kid. Jiraiya was already holding up one of the slips of paper. This, Naruto, is chakra paper. It will help you tell your affinity. Naruto raised his hand. Sensei. Jiraiya paused. Did you already discover your affinity? No, I mean, Kurama said something to me about being a sage and waiting on the elemental stuff for now. Jiraiya blinked. There are fox sages. Oh, never mind. Of course there would be. I don't know what elemental jutsu have to do with that, though. He said that foxes were different than toads, but I don't know what that means, either. Right. No matter what, though, you'll need a lot more chakra control than you have right now, if you're thinking about sage stuff this young. Naruto turned his thoughts inward. Kurama? Yes, he's right about that one. I have a feeling on what he might teach you. It's useful, and will certainly help with your chakra control, so pay attention. Jiraiya hesitated for a moment, made a few hand seals, and slapped the ground, making the wildlife around them instantly muted and slightly blurry. He took a blank scroll from his waist and rolled it out, sitting next to it. Naruto followed his example. Now, Naruto, I'm not even entirely sure I should teach this to you. I'm not even sure how your father managed the full version. And without your prowess in shadow clones, I wouldn't even consider it. But if you want chakra control, and a good example of battle-ready seals, this is the best possible skill for you to learn. Inside Naruto, Kurama was reeling. He was fully expecting the Rasengan, Naruto's signature move last time, and the only one of Minato's jutsu that Jiraiya was supposed to know. Besides, it was well known that he couldn't do the Hiraishin. Still, he did say that it wasn't the full version. Was there another? Jiraiya's brush danced across the paper, forming 3 tightly packed circles of seal script. They were certainly smaller than the seal on Naruto's belly, but they were by no means simple. Those are 3 of the 4 seals that make up the Hiraishin, one of the very few techniques that results in true teleportation. Naruto's eyes widened. Teleportation? Jiraiya nodded. Yes, teleportation. It was one of the chief reasons your father was so feared on the battlefield. Naruto nodded back. Kurama told me about that. But I thought that knowledge was lost. He didn't really write it on a scroll or anything. Not all of it was lost. The way your father used it, well, I have no idea. I've already told you about the difficulties of combining complicated seals. The only way I know how to use it is with 3 people, standing exactly equidistant from each other. Each with their own seal. Trust me, I've tried to combine them. It just doesn't work. So why are you teaching it to me? Jiraiya chuckled. Not only can you create 3 shadow clones at once, you don't even hesitate to throw them away. The Hiraishin wasn't designed for shadow clones, they destabilize immediately, but teleportation at the cost of 3 shadow clones isn't something to sneeze at. Naruto nodded. Besides, you need the chakra control practice. And who knows? You might find something I didn't and rediscover your father's jutsu. His face lit up. Right. Then that's what I'm going to do. Jiraiya held up a hand. Naruto, listen. This jutsu is not something to take lightly. It is not anything like what you have been taught before, and I do not expect you to succeed for a good while. These seals, only the 4th targeting seal should ever be written down, you understand? The only reason I can even show you these is that you are immune to mental jutsu that might be able to take the information from you. Naruto gulped. So if I can't write them down, you write them in the air, in chakra. Not even blood. It takes a lot of control. It is another reason the Byakugan should never leave Konoha. But for your first attempt, you will use these written circles, just to get a feel for the jutsu. Naruto stood, a little shaky on his feet. Okay. If you're sure. Now, make 3 clones. He made the cross seal, and 3 of them appeared. Jiraiya tore the scroll between the circles, passing 1 to each clone. Each of you stand around Naruto, with that on your feet. They did so, using their arms to make sure they were at an equal distance. Jiraiya nodded approvingly. He tore another strip from the scroll and wrapped it around the handle of an ordinary kunai before writing a few characters on it. He held it up in front of all the Narutos. This, Naruto, is the targeting seal. It can be applied in many ways, to all sorts of objects, including people if necessary. It contains very little information by itself, and so it is of very little concern if it falls into the hands of an enemy. He threw the kunai to stick in the ground a few feet from the original Naruto's position, and well within the privacy seal. Now, clones, channel chakra into those seals. The exact same amount of chakra, otherwise it won't work. See if you can find that target. Several clones frowned at the relatively vague description, but as they channeled chakra into the seals, they discovered that it was rather easy to tell how much chakra the others had channeled just by keeping their fingers touching. And in the back of their minds, they could indeed sense that target, as well as quite a few others significantly farther away. The exchange of chakra between them was not good for their clone bodies, though, and realizing they didn't have much time, and that the seals themselves seemed to be fully charged, they released the energy. The clones poofed in a cloud of chakra smoke, Naruto disappeared in a golden flash, and reappeared, right on top of the kunai handle. Preoccupied by the new clone memories, and not expecting to have his left foot supported by nothing, he fell immediately into the dirt. Ow! Jiraiya looked at him with a flash of panic before relief overtook his face. He did not tell them to activate the seals, or even how much chakra was needed for a jump. Naruto looked up. Sorry, my clones tell me that they were destabilizing. And the seals were already charged. Jiraiya was incredulous. Charged? Completely? Right, I forget how much chakra you have sometimes. Fortunately, an incomplete charge usually meant a lower distance teleport, as long as all the seals were charged evenly, rather than the more common sealing accidents. But a completely charged seal meant, well, Minato actually hadn't discovered an upper limit of how far he could go. When you master the jutsu, you'll find how much you need for each jump. But now that you have a general idea of how this jutsu works. Jiraiya took the seals back, wiping them with a hand seal and wave over the paper. You need to learn how to write with chakra. Write with chakra? Jiraiya nodded. I'm sure the normal way of writing with chakra should be easy for you. Concentrate enough chakra to one of your fingers, and you can burn your writing onto something. But that is not what I'm talking about today. This requires a lighter touch. He took one of the torn pieces of the scroll, which was now blank, and started writing with a finger. Nothing seemed to appear, but when he stopped, he channeled chakra into it, causing thin lines to appear. It isn't as versatile as a calligraphy brush, but it is decent at keeping information secret to anyone without a Byakugan. It takes control, though, to channel enough chakra to make an impression without burning the paper. And most importantly, it is the only way to make an invisible seal. Naruto frowned. But you said I'd have to do the seal in the air. That's the next step. It takes even more control, though, as you have to hold it all at once, not just make an impression into paper. Naruto shifted uncomfortably. But if the Kyuubi's trying to get you into Sage Chakra, you need the control. I don't need you dying on me. Right. I get it. Remember, kid, that other shinobi have to practice all the time to increase their chakra reserves. You simply have to train in the other direction. Let's get started, then. Not so fast. You still owe me homework, remember?